Greetings and God bless you. Thank you for those of you who will be tuning in. I welcome you and I wish you a happy new year. Prayerfully, your new year is off to a fantastic start. And if it is not, that is okay. I encourage you to stay optimistic, to stay hopeful, because I can assure you that your new year is going to get better. If you are anything like me, I can speak for myself. My new year has started off rocky, but nonetheless, I am grateful. I am hopeful. I am optimistic, and I am looking forward to what God is doing and is going to do in this new year, and what He is going to do in and through me. And so stay optimistic, stay hopeful. It is going to get better if that is you. Oftentimes we look at our situation and the circumstance that's going on around us, and we tend to focus on it because we can see it with our natural eyes right in front of us. We can't not see it. And so it becomes magnified to the point where we can't see what's on the other side of our circumstance. And so what we end up doing is trying to figure it out. Or we try to figure out how we can get out of that situation, how we can change that circumstance, when in reality, God is saying to be still and know that I am God. And so if that is you, if that happens to be you, try not to focus on what you can see, what's going on the outside of you, what's going on around you, but focus on what's going on in you that God may be using that very circumstance to deal with. And also consider what God has placed in you that He is using that circumstance to bring out of you. Some things in you that may have been lying dormant, some healing that you may need, that God just may be using that very circumstance to deal with those things and to bring those things that He has placed in you out of you. So there is another side to it, but if we focus on what's going on around us, we'll be blinded by the situation and not be able to look on the other side, what God is trying to bring us to. And so I just want to encourage you with that. I finally have some time to release this video that God wanted me to release. Recently, I did a 5-day masterclass, Be Released to Walk into Your Purpose, where I gave 5 keys to healing so that you can walk in freedom, where the keys were trust, love, forgiveness, understanding, and doing these things without fear. So silencing the voice of fear so that we will be able to use the keys. And so when I did that masterclass, I thought that was it. But then God said, do one more class. And so that's what this class is. It's a review of the 5-day masterclass in just a more condensed, collective, and practical way, because we want to assure that people not only receive the information, but actually know how to apply the information. We can receive a lot of information and not know what to do with it. And so we just kind of throw it away. And so we want to make sure that the tools that we're giving, the keys that we're given during that masterclass class, that people are actually able to use throughout this year. And know how to use them, know what to do with them. You can have them and not know what to do with them. So we want to assure that you have the keys and you know what to do with the keys so that you can use them throughout 2023. And that come 2024, you are kicking down the door with no fear, no charges, no conditions, and no pain. And so that's what this masterclass is. And I'm calling this class here a challenge, because anything that we want to do and come out victorious, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a challenge involved in it. Nothing just comes easy. Nothing just comes easy when we're trying to come out on the other side of something. It's going to be a challenge. And so I'm calling this a challenge because of that. But I assure you that if you use these keys and you're going through 2023 and you're using these keys, even when you fall, you get back up and you use the keys, you're going to come out on the other side. You will come out on the other side. And so once again, the keys that I gave was understanding, trust, love, and forgiveness, and doing these things without fear. If you lack If you lack in any of these areas, you are restricted in the same areas. So when you show up, whether you're showing up on your job, whether you're showing up in relationships, whether you're showing up raising your children, in your family, in ministry, if you lack in any of these areas, you're showing up in protective mode. You're showing up in protective mode. If you're constantly in a mode where you feel the need to protect yourself, you're in a mode of survival. You're not in a mode of victory. You're not walking in victory, but you're in a mode of survival. And if you're in a mode of survival, this means that you are not resting. You're not resting. And like I was saying earlier, the first thing that we try to do when we're in a situation is try to figure out how to get out of it. And then we neglect what God may be trying to do in and through us through the situation, because we're so busy trying to figure out how to get out of the situation. And sometimes we just have to be still. Sometimes we just have to be still. The healing comes in the resting. The healing doesn't come in the doing. We're so prone to doing, but we haven't yet learned how to be. We really haven't learned how to be. And so learning to rest will posture you for healing. Healing is not going to be, healing doesn't just happen. It's not going to be forced upon any of us. It's received. It's received. And to receive anything, you must be positioned to receive it. And that's difficult for many of us. You know, we often say it's okay, give me, give me, give me. We live in a, we live in a society where people are takers. People are definitely takers. So they know how to receive in the natural. But when it comes time to receiving things that will help us, to heal and to grow and to walk in freedom, those things we don't know how to receive because it takes us having to rest. And that's the hard part, because we're so used to doing. We have to be positioned to receive anything, even with salvation. Those who neglect salvation is a free gift from God. So the only thing we have to do is receive it. So it seems as if it's easy, but it's not easy, because you have to be in a position to receive it. And so if I'm offered salvation, but I'm still in a mindset of, I want to figure my own life out, then I'm not in a position to receive salvation. If I'm offered salvation, but I'm still in a mindset of, I got this, I can do this on my own, I don't believe, I'm just going to, live life the way I want to live life on my own terms, then that means I'm not in a position to receive salvation. And so it sounds easy to receive, but oftentimes if we're not ready to rest, then we cannot receive. And so the keys that were given to me for this masterclass, trust, love, forgiveness, and understanding, and doing these things without fear. These keys were actually given to me. God gave me these keys to break free from my own pain and trauma. And so in other words, I was being held back. And these keys were a means for me to move forward and walk into my freedom. So these were not just words that I came up with to say, try this and you're going to be healed and you're going to walk in freedom. No, these are keys that God actually had given me for my own personal journey, for my own personal healing, that he had given me and told me to release. He had given me for my own life. Because I was being held back. How often have we, we're gone forth season after season in our lives. We walk through season after season in our lives, and it may even still be walking through seasons and seasons of our lives, but we haven't addressed the trauma that's in our lives. And so we can be moving forward, or seeming as if we're moving forward, going forth in our lives, but we're still being held back in a lot of areas because we haven't addressed the trauma that's in our lives. And so that's, God gave me those keys for me to address personally, on a personal level, for me to address my pain and trauma so that I can be released and move forward, and really move forward. Not just go forward, but to actually move forward. How often do we neglect to deal with our painful experiences that have left us in states where we're fearful of trusting, forgiving, loving, and understanding? How many times, how many things have we how often do we neglect to deal with those painful experiences that has left us in these situations where we don't know how to love, we don't know how to forgive, we don't know how to understand, we don't know how to trust? Remember, I'm giving you these keys, but the master key is Jesus. And so if we haven't learned the tools of forgiving, trusting, loving, and understanding from him, we won't be able to do it. He is the master key. But many of us have had painful experiences in our lives where these areas in our lives were crippled. We keep moving forward, but these areas in our lives are crippled. And so ultimately, we're really stuck and we're really stagnant, though we're moving forward. We've grown, but haven't progressed past our pain or matured. There's a lot of adults that have not matured. There's a difference. Just because you are of a certain age and, it does not make you mature. It does not make you mature. And so we find what we do is we find ways to cope and to live our lives, work our jobs, raise our children, please other people, but don't take the time to address our trauma. Why is that? Because it's a challenge. And many of us don't want the challenge. To be still and to learn how to overcome and be victorious, not just survivors. We don't take the time to be still and learn how to overcome and be victorious, not just survivors. We've mastered being survivors. But there's a challenge and a process that comes along with being victorious. And many of us don't want to take the time. And so we remain survivors versus overcomers. And so by now you should be thinking of trauma in your life. You should be thinking of the trauma in your life or experiences that have left you in a crippling position. We're going to take our time with this. Prayerfully, it won't be too long, which I doubt that it would be, but we're going to take our time with this because whatever you did not catch in the 5-day masterclass, I want you to catch with this class. So hopefully you have your pen and paper with you so that you can take the notes, so that you can write down anything that's jumping out at you, at you as it relates to your own personal life. And once we go through it and get to the end, you're going to have practical steps. You're going to know how to use these keys as it relates to your own personal struggles in the areas of trust, love, forgiveness, understanding, and fear. And so again, you should be thinking of the trauma in your life or your experiences that have left you in a crippling position. The pain that you feel from that hurtful experience that you haven't been able to get past. You're wounded, crippled, but have kept moving, striving, avoiding, and ignoring the pain that's crying out for attention to be healed. And ultimately, your healing begins. Ultimately, your healing begins and ends with you. That's important. Your healing begins and ends with you. So I want you to be focused as we go throughout the rest of this teaching. Be focused on you right now. Don't think about what this person did to you or that person did to you that caused the hurt or the experience, but think about you right now, because your healing begins and ends with you. We're not going into a new year. We're not going throughout a new year crippled, but we're entering with confidence in a newfound hope and grace. So begin asking yourself, are you ready to let go? Are you ready to let go? Begin to ask yourself that. Are you ready to let go? As you're thinking of your situations, your experiences, your pain, ask yourself, are you ready to let go? Are you ready to be released? Are you ready to be free? Are you ready to walk in a new you, a free you? This can be scary for some people, so I have to ask the question, are you ready? And you have to ask yourself the question, because you may feel like you want to be free, but there could be fear stopping you, and we're going to deal with that. But there could be a fear stopping you from pursuing your freedom and your healing. So are you ready? And this takes us right into our first key, which we talked about, was trust. And I want you to consider these factors as I'm going through these bullet points. Once again, you're focused on yourself. You're highlighting any areas of struggle as it relates to the 5 keys. And you're writing them down. Are you living your life in protective mode? Are you living your life in protective mode? We're talking about the key of trust. How do you act towards someone you don't trust? And so I know I can say, personally, when you think about relationships that you have with people you don't trust, you're not going to be completely open with that individual or those people. You might be giving them the side eye. You may hold back from them. You may not release as much to this person as you would to another person because you don't trust that person. So how do you act towards someone you don't trust? If you have issues in this area, I want you to think about that. How do you act towards someone you don't trust? And what does this look like to you personally? I know for me, like I said, I'm going to hold back from that person. I'm not going to share as much. I'm not going to be as open with that person as I may be with someone that I trust, as I may be with God. I'm not going to be as open with that person. I'm going to be a little guarded with that person. So think about how you act towards someone that you don't trust and how you show up when you're around that person, or if you just have a general issue in the area of trust. This, how you act with an individual, is how you show up when you don't trust someone. Are you holding back? Are you resistant? Are you hesitant? You may even withhold or withdraw from someone you don't trust. Where are you finding yourself in this? If you're finding yourself anywhere in that relationship is restricting you. If you feel a lack of trust in any relationship that you have, that relationship is restricting you because you fear that if you let go with this person, you're going to get hurt. And so this is what having a lack of trust can look like. Are you seeing yourself at all in this? You don't have the security in your relationship. When you're in a relationship with someone you don't trust, you don't have the security in that relationship, meaning you don't feel secure. Even if you're not an insecure person, when you're in that relationship or you're around those individuals, you don't have a sense of security. You don't feel safe. you don't feel covered. So automatically you feel as if you have to protect yourself. That's trust. So I hope you were writing down some things as we go into the key of understanding. If you found anything in the as we just talked about the key of trust, that's how it will look like. Those are some things it will look like when you are dealing with a lack of trust in your life and in your relationships, but mainly within you, because we're talking about us. We're dealing with us on a personal level. And so as we go into understanding, anytime we experience trauma, we're experiencing sin being inflicted on us. Sin leads to death. And so naturally, what was done to us will not give us life, but aims to take our predestined life and identity. And so let me try to explain that to you in case you didn't get it. The Bible says that sin leads to death. And so anytime someone inflicts any pain on us, it was through their sin. And so naturally, when we're dealing with that pain inflicted on us through that sin, it's going to lead to death if we don't deal with it. It's never going to lead to life. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to just turn around and lead to life. It has to be dealt with so that we can begin to produce, so that we can begin to live. And so any pain that we have that we are not dealing with is definitely out to kill our destiny. Make sure that we will never reach our destiny. And so we have to deal with it. And so the question for the bullet point is, how do you show up as a result of what was inflicted on you, or how you were conditioned to be based on your trauma in life? How do you show up as a result of what was inflicted on you, or how you were conditioned to be based on the trauma in your life? So once again, how are you showing up? That's the first question we should be asking ourselves. As a result of our pain, how are we showing up? Because that's not the true you. Are you walking around with a chip on your shoulder, like someone owes you something? Are you living a life where you're inflicting sin and pain on others as a result of you not dealing with yours? Are you viewing yourself as the victim and blaming everybody else for what happened? Are you so focused on what was outwardly done to you and focus on building the wall of protection that actually needs to come down for you to be healed? Because that's, once again, when we're in protective mode, when we're living in protective mode as a result of what happened to us, we tend to build walls. Remember, I said pride is pain. We tend to build walls to protect us, but ultimately those walls have to come down in that place of rest in order for our pain, us to receive healing for our pain and our trauma. Are you protecting versus releasing your pain? Are you protecting versus releasing your pain? So we all know what happened in the garden when Adam and Eve, when the enemy inflicted sin upon Adam and Eve by planting a seed of disobedience in them that made them sin against God. So when they were in the garden, here comes the enemy. You know, he began to speak to them. He planted a seed, and what happened was they ended up planted a seed of disobedience. They ended up disobeying God, as they ended up sinning against God. And that's what happens to us when people inflict their sin up on us. And so now we're left with the wounds in our soul. We're left with the trauma. We're left with the pain. And so now we have sins in our lives as a result, and we're sinning against God. Them sinning against God separated them from God, because sin separates us from God. And so oftentimes we have these sins in our lives that we run from God because sin separates us from God. When God is saying to run to him, not from him. And so we find ourselves sinning against God based on the sin that was inflicted upon us. And so when we end up doing when we do this is we neglect our identity in him due to the identity that the enemy inflicted upon us. So Adam and Eve, they ended up taking the identity of that the enemy gave to them, and they neglected the identity that God had given them. And that goes for all of us. God has already predestined our destiny. He has already identified us. He already knew what he created us for. But because of our pain and the sin that's in our lives, we neglect our God-given identities. And we receive the identity that the enemy gives to us. The broken one, the one that needs healing, the one that rejects God because of our healing. Also, what Adam and Eve did was place blame outwardly. So when they sinned against God and they ate the forbidden fruit, the first thing they did when they were addressed by God was blame each other. They placed blame outwardly. No one took the time to understand what happened. We're talking about the key of understanding now. No one took the time to understand what happened or why they did what they did. It was easier to not acknowledge it and blame one another. Is that not what we do oftentimes? We're placing blame outwardly. We're placing blame outwardly, and we're not taking the time to understand what's going on with us internally. Why did we do what we did? Why are we doing what we're doing? What's going on inside of me that's causing me to behave like this? We don't take the time to get the understanding of our situations. And we often spend so much time on what was done to us and who did it, and we neglect dealing with the trauma that resulted from the sin so that our situation and we ourselves can change. I'll say that one more time. We often spend so much time on what was done to us and who did it, and we neglect dealing with the trauma that resulted from the sin so that our situation and we ourselves can be changed. And I was just saying that earlier, how we focus so much on who did what to us versus how can I get out of this? What do I need to do to heal? What do I need to do to be free from this? It's no longer about who did it and why they did it. And the answer to that is because they're in sin. We don't know any better. We do things to people when we don't know any better. So we have to begin to focus on and try to get an understanding of the trauma, not so much as why did they do this? Why? We're trying to understand why they did it. Well, let's just understand on how it affected me. Let's try to get an understanding on how did what they do affect me and what do I need to do to get my healing. And so when we place blame outwardly, we never get an understanding of what's actually going on with us personally. And this is also why we can't blame the devil for everything, because as long as we neglect our trauma He has access through these areas. And you have to cut off his access. It's up to us. Like I said, the healing begins and ends with us. We oftentimes like to say the devil, the devil, the devil. But when we're not taking the time to deal with, he's attracted to those broken areas in our lives. He's attracted to our brokenness. He's attracted to those things that are not healed in us, that we often neglect receiving healing. Those are the areas that he can get us. And so we want to blame him, but we're giving him access through not getting our healing. And so we have to cut off the access. Take the time to understand your own trauma will posture. Taking the time to understand your own trauma will posture you to understand the pain and the trauma of others. So once again, we're constantly, taking the focus off of us, even though we're in turmoil. We're trying to figure out why this person did this, why that person hurt us like that. But when we deal with our own trauma, when we start with us, then we can gain an understanding of not only our own trauma, but an understanding of the trauma of others. And that right there is healing. So let's go into the key of love. One of the questions I've asked on my journey of healing is, how do I love when I've been through so much hurt and trauma? I didn't think it was possible. I literally used to ask God that question, like, how do you expect me to love when I've never experienced genuine love? When I've been through so much hurt and so much trauma, I don't get it. Like, that's impossible to do. That's how that's how I was thinking. I would pray about that. I just didn't understand how God expected me to do that. But all things are possible through God, and he is teaching me how this is actually possible, and that all things are actually possible through God. Remember, I said we have the keys. God has given me the keys, and I'm releasing the keys to you, but the master key is Jesus. We cannot do any of these things. And so when I'm asking a question like how, it's not through me. It wasn't through me that I was to do these things. I was to receive from him and then release the love through that. There's no way I can do it on my own. There's no way you can do any of these things on your own. And so here's the bullet points for love. Love is an action. It's something that you act out. And so how oftentimes do we hear people say, I love you, I love you, and they say love you, but there's no action behind it. Everybody knows the famous scripture, John 3:16, where God says, he so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. God acted upon his love. He didn't just say, I love you or love you. He showed us. He showed us how he is the epitome of love. And how if we want to love the same way, we look at him. We go to him to learn how to love that way. When he can send his only son to die from us, what else do we need? No one else on this earth can prove that type of love. And so he proved to us what love looks like, and how we can trust him to receive that love from him so that we can give it. And so love is an action. It's something that you act out. Are you genuinely loving in your relationships, or are there conditions? Ask yourself, are you genuinely loving in your relationships, or are there conditions? If so, this is not love. This shows that there is a wall, a blockage. And so I know I went through a phase, and I'm sure many of us did, where you go through life and you're like, I'm not trusting that person. I'll give them a piece of my heart, but I'm not giving them all of it because I don't know. My heart has been broken way too much. And so I was loving with conditions. And if that person got on my nerves or did me the wrong way, my love was cut off. I was done. That's love with conditions. That's not love. And so that's a demonstration how I was acting out. That was a demonstration that there was a wall up. I had a wall up. And if you have a wall, there's a blockage. And of course, having a blockage is not good. We have life through Jesus. We have life through Jesus laying down his life through the love of God. So that shows you how important love is. And this key of love is. Because we have life through Jesus's act of love. So that tells me you're not living if you're not genuinely loving. Because love gives life. You're not living if you're not genuinely loving. The love I'm referring to is the love of God, the agape love, not just the love that, like I said, we just say I love you or love you, but there's no action behind it. God's love is agape love. It's a pure love. It's one that will override any trauma in your life and cause you to look over the sins in the lives of others. That's the type of love I'm talking about. The type of love that God had for us when he sent his son. He didn't say, well, they're in sin. I'm not. No, they're in sin. No, even while we were in sin, he sent his son out of love to die for us. And so it's a pure type of love and will override any trauma in our lives and cause you to look over the sins in the lives of others. Just like God looked over our sins. It's the love that doesn't see the person first, but sees them through a lens of love and is driven by that. So how often do we see the person and we're like, or some things that they're doing, some ways that they're behaving, and we're like, we have decided how to love that person. Like, okay. Just by how we view them from our perspective and even from our own brokenness sometimes. We choose how to love that person based on how they may behave or based on how we feel about them. But the love I'm talking about is a pure love that doesn't see the person first. It sees from the lens of love and is driven by that. Love settles you internally so that you're not moved by the actions of others. And so when you have gotten to the point where you're successful in using the key of love, you'll find that you're not moved by the actions of others. Whereas before we were talking about, placing blame outwardly. When you are solid in love, when you have received and know how to use the gift of love, the key of love, you're not easily moved by the actions of others, but driven by love. And this takes us into forgiveness. The key of forgiveness, it's for you to give. Waiting on someone to apologize for hurting you or waiting for some kind of atonement for someone inflicting their sin on you is a blockage. This means that they hold the key to you moving forward. And so if you're waiting on an apology from someone and you're holding unforgiveness in your heart until they apologize, or you're waiting on, I've heard people say that, like, I need to be atoned. I need some type of atonement for what you did to me. But when we're waiting on that from another person, because they inflicted their sin on us, that means we have given them the key. They hold the key to you moving forward. They hold the key to us moving forward. They hold the key to you moving forward. Now, I'm giving you, these are your keys to use. But when we choose not to forgive, they have the key. And so here's the bullet points for forgiveness. Will you be healed from the hurt and pain and sin of unforgiveness if the person acknowledged or apologized for what they did? So if someone that inflicted pain upon you or sin upon you, if they did apologize, if they did offer some kind of atonement, will that heal you? Will that heal you? Think about it. Is it going to ease you in any kind of way? Will it actually, it might make you say, well, thank you, I finally received. But is it going to heal the damage that was done? People can cause damage, but they don't hold the key to you healing from it. That's the thing. It's easy for you or I to cause damage in somebody else's life. That is so ridiculously easy. But they cannot, I can't heal you if I hurt you. I can apologize, but I can't heal you. That person cannot heal you from the damage that they've caused. And so ultimately, it is you that have to release and receive the healing that God wants you to, that God wants to give you. Your healing begins and ends with you. Ultimately, regardless of what was done to us, what sin was inflicted upon us, it is up to us to release it and receive the healing that God wants to give us. When we hold unforgiveness, it blocks us from receiving from God. When we hold unforgiveness, it's once again, all of these things are walls if we have these areas in our lives, if we lack in any of these areas in our lives, and unforgiveness is no different. It blocks us from receiving from God. It's a sin, and like we said earlier, sin separates us from God. And so if we have any unforgiveness in our hearts, in our lives, it separates us from God. Any debt that you have is outstanding until you pay it. So if you have any outstanding bills right now, it's going to stay outstanding, right, until you pay it. And once you pay it, your charges are cleared. You are now released from that commitment, and some of your funds are freed up. And it's no different with releasing the debt of unforgiveness. And so the last bullet point says, how many outstanding balances do you have? Charges that are against you due to the sin of unforgiveness. It's time to clear the debt of unforgiveness. The next key is fear, where we have to silence the voice of fear so that it will not stop us from using the key of trust, love, forgiveness, and understanding. And so all of these things begin with making a decision to do them. Fear will try and hold us back from doing these things by telling us not to put ourselves out there like that, to protect ourselves from further damage, or that nothing will result from us doing these things. These are the things that fear will speak to us. When we're talking about going through 2023 and using these keys, fear is going to try to tell us that's not going to work. Don't waste your time. Just try to figure it out on your own. Are those keys really going to help you? Are they really going to protect you? Nothing's really going to happen if you use those keys. Fear will try to tell us that, so we can just say, okay, I'm going to just keep proceeding as normal, trying to figure this out on my own. I'll figure it out. And so here's some things to consider. Are you struggling in the areas of trust, understanding, love, forgiveness, and fear? which we should have answered that question earlier. But are you struggling in any of these areas? If you're struggling, not fear, trust, understanding, love, and forgiveness. If you're struggling in any of these areas, fear has free reign to torture you through any of these areas that you struggle in. And that's just the truth. If we have a lack of trust, if we have unforgiveness in our hearts, if we have a lack of understanding, fear can creep in and keep us stuck right there. It can use those things to keep us stuck right there. And so in order to silence fear, we have to be released in these areas. You know, the bottom line is all these are walls. All of these things that we lack in these areas, all of them are walls. They keep us imprisoned. And it's time to use the keys that God gave us so that we can be released. So I'm not sure how much longer I have on my battery, because it looks like my battery is getting ready to die. And so I'm going to definitely have to come back on and do a part 2. It's not much longer. It's probably about 10 more minutes of this teaching. But yes, it's going to definitely have to be a part 2. And so I will see you guys on part 2. I hope that you enjoyed this part of the teaching thus far, and that you have been taking your notes. Go back and watch the replay if you need to, because like I said, if you use these keys, you are going to walk in your freedom. When it comes time for 2024 to hit, you are kicking down the door. No more fear, no more pain, no more conditions, and no more charges. And so I will see you soon. I'll see you on the next video.